Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the superintendent's recommendations and reports. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Birding. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Martin to cover the items listed under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, several items for you tonight under Personnel Professional. Item number 1, resignations, letters A through G. Now, before you think there's some great exodus of teachers from our district, I just want to mention that all of these resignations, except for one, were people who were just hired on a 1-year non-renewal contract. We only needed them for 1 year. Some of them were for numbers in certain grade levels were extra high in a school, and we hired them just on a 1-year basis. So that was the majority of those resignations. Item number 2, employment, letters A through G. We've started the hiring process. Letter H, summer school principal, and that's secondary summer school principal. Letter I, summer school substitute teachers for testing. Letter J, elementary summer school tutoring principal. Letter K, elementary summer school tutors. Letter L, preschool summer school teacher. Letter M, academy extended school year administrator. Letter N, academy extended school year, those would be teachers. Letter O, special education extended school year. And letter P is a non-renewal of substitute teachers for the 2019-2020 year end. Those are teachers who have worked for us for 120 days or more, and so they have to resign at the end of that year, so they don't consider themselves employed for the following year. That concludes the items I have for your consideration under Personnel Professional.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendations.
So moved.
I'll second.
I heard Mrs. Gundrum motion and Mrs. O'Neill second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Gundrum.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill.
Yes.
Mrs. Shorter.
Yes.
Mr. Begley.
Yes.
Mr. Birding.
Yes. Motion passes.
All right. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Penny to cover the items listed under Personnel Support.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Birding, members of the board, I have the following items for your consideration this evening under Personnel Support. Under item number 1, resignations, letters A through C. Under item number 2, employment, letters A and B. Under item number 3, termination of probationary employment, letter A. This concludes the items I have for your consideration this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Penny. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve those recommendations.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
So I heard Mrs. Shorter motion and Mr. Begley chimed in second.
Mm-hmm.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Mrs. Lane, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Shorter.
Yes.
Mr. Begley.
Yes.
Mr. Birding.
Yes.
Mrs. Gundrum.
Yes.
Mrs. O'Neill.
Yes.
Motion passes.